Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Back with Access to Democracy. Back with one of my favorite guests, who every time she's on, I get abuse from all my liberal friends as to why are you having Pat Anderson back on the show?
You got to have some Republicans on.
I love Pat Anderson. I really do. We don't agree on very much. I'm not even sure we would agree on the weather. But, you know, as far to the left as I am, you are to the right. I mean, when Pat Anderson has a tea party, people like Ron Paul show up. Mm-hmm. So there is no question. I mean, she has held so many offices in city and state and national party and governmental positions that it's incredible. One of her problems is that she's honest. And as a result of that, she exposed to the Republicans this past year terrible mismanagement, maybe even criminal mismanagement of the funds of the Republican committee in this state, to the extent that they have been broke. I don't know where they are today, but they certainly
a little
were
better.
broke.
A little better.
And so they got very angry and they voted her out as state committee woman at the convention in May. But that's what happens to whistleblowers, that's what happens to honest people. But she's just come back from the Republican convention where she slept through Mitt Romney's address. And
well, after Eastwood, you know, I mean, nothing could top that.
No, because most people...
He was great. He was great. He had the place absolutely rolling.
Well, that tells you something about the people that were there. That was really embarrassing to see that man degenerate from the icon that he is to what he was on that stage.
I'm very proud. Eastwood knows his politics. I think he's, you know, he's not a Republican in the traditional sense.
He voted for Obama 4 years ago.
Right, that's right. And he, on social issues, he's very liberal. On fiscal issues, he's very conservative. And, you know, and he's a mayor or a former, I don't know if he's a former mayor or
former. He served.
Carmel, California.
He became mayor because they had several things that bothered him. One, the woman who was the mayor had enacted an ice cream policy where you couldn't walk on the street and eat an ice cream cone. And that was one of two things. And the other was that he wanted to set up his foundation there or his restaurant, whatever it is, and he kept getting trouble from the jealousy of those people.
Yeah.
So he ran against her. He spent, I think, $40,000 to her $200, and he beat her in Carmel. And he served his term as mayor. He got his zoning, and they changed the ice cream regulation around, and then he quit.
Yeah, and I would say he's, you know, probably more libertarian than anything else, and which I think a lot of people are, and we should probably talk about that. You brought up Ron Paul, and you said he's to the right of, you know, the right. In reality, Ron Paul tends to be you have to look at politics differently.
Well,
I think
Ron
he's
Paul
more
is
libertarian.
clearly
than-
libertarian.
Right, which is
even
not
though
to the right of Republicans. It's
He's
a
in the
different sort of
Republican
thing.
Party, but
Right.
you voted for Ron Paul.
I did.
So I guess you're a libertarian too.
Well, I am I would say I'm a libertarian with a small L.
Or maybe you're-
and a lot of people in the Republican Party
Maybe
now,
you're a
that's the way it's
recovering
going.
libertarian.
Well, no, I don't go as far as some of the libertarian things, but I'm a small government conservative, but I believe very much in liberty, and I think both, the Republican Party can be guilty too of using government to try to push their viewpoints, and I think the more small government libertarian philosophy, or small government, Republican, and that's a Tea Party thing too, is that we shouldn't be using government for any of this stuff. Period. That we shouldn't be
I
forcing
agree
it.
that a lot of
So
this should
you
not
actually,
be.
we have that in common. We're not
But
that far
what do you
apart,
think
Ellen.
of Citizens United decision?
Well, it's certainly changing the nature of politics.
Yeah, 12 people can elect a president with their money,
It's very
as
much
opposed to
changing things.
350 million who can only spend $5 or $10 apiece.
Yeah. The big question is if things are disclosed, then at least you know where the dollars are coming from. But I think more than anything, how the courts decided, and corporations or people and these sort of things.
Well, we know the corporations aren't people.
Well, the courts
just
say
checked-
that corporations are
I just
people.
checked the maternity wards. There's no corporations in there having babies. I checked the funeral parlors. There's no corporations in there burying relatives. I've checked the restaurants. There's no corporations who are having individual meals.
Well, it is what it is. The question is, and I'm not going to defend it, but that's the law of the land, and
We're making
the-
headway already.
Well, the question is, you have to make sure things are properly disclosed. I think if the public knows where the dollars are coming from,
The funny
that's
thing
what's
is
important.
that
Where
the
are-
Supreme
how are
Court
things
really
being funded?
didn't say that there shouldn't be disclosure. It's the lower courts, including the Eighth Circuit 2 days ago, which made that decision in the local case that called for disclosure, that seemed to take it one step beyond. And that's why it's
Right.
going to go back to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court never said there should not be disclosure. And to me, that's an absolute. I mean, you have to know where the money is coming from. You have a
Yeah,
right
I
to
believe
know
in disclosure.
that
very
the
much.
Koch brothers
You know,
are buying so much that
Oh, Alan, the left is way more guilty of these sort of things. Just look at Minnesota. Look at Dayton's ex-wife, and she spent millions of dollars, and she's going to spend millions of dollars trying to take
she
back
could
the
spend
legislature.
her entire fortune and she can't compete with the Koch brothers.
Not true.
Do you know
Well,
that they
Koch
they make
brothers
16
specifically.
no,
But-
what is it?
but if you look
$61 million a day that I think
well,
that
they
they
are
make.
very successful businessmen. But if you look at what's happening in
Started out,
Minnesota,
right. They started
it's
out
the
on
left.
the street with a little.
It's the left that
Yeah,
is
that's
that
right.
is spending huge amounts of money from certain individuals, huge amounts of money. Go back
That's
to
only
Soros
because the
and the Secretary of
Republicans-
State project. So
Republicans
both sides have
are
their
so corrupt that they threw their money away. I mean,
both sides have their
you
big,
exposed
their big
those guys
dollars.
here.
Well, here in Minnesota, I think what we were talking about is what happened with the Republican Party, and the party was, and it was one specific person, or it was our former chair or our chair, and a few staff people that were, working directly for him, and they were filing false reports, and they were giving false information to the executive committee, and I happened to be put on that executive committee about a year and a half
And you
ago.
had the courage to say, "Show me the money," which they have never gotten over.
Well, that's right. That's right. I mean, it blew it up, and he resigned, and would it have come out anyway? It's a huge amount of money, Alan. It was $2 million.
Yeah, I know. It was
Net
millions of dollars. Net
This is
$2 million.
after fund. It's a huge amount of money, and I think that it has harmed the party so much that it's going to be hard for the party to be a big player, the Republican Party, in election cycles.
It's going to take a little bit of time to come back.
It's going to take several years. And so what's filling the void, at least on the Republican side, is some of these groups like we just talked about, the 527s and the PACs and so on. And that's where the caucuses, that's where the dollars are going to go to help do the things that the Republican Party used to do. That's
Well,
what's
it's going to be
happening
very
this year.
interesting this year to see
Yeah.
really what happens
Yeah.
in the local elections. I mean, the Republicans really came in 2010. So many people sat home, 12 million in this state.
12 million? There aren't 12 million people in this state.
1,200,000,
There you go.
excuse me.
Yeah.
And didn't vote. The result was that you took both houses of the legislature for the first time in 40 years. And in the 2 years that you've had the legislature, you managed to do nothing.
Oh, no. You know what, they came in, there was a lot of inexperience. I want to start out from that side, because there were I think the freshman classes were bigger, you know, than the non-freshman classes. But they were able to you know, take care. They did a lot of reforms, things that, and actually that Governor Dayton, to his credit, you know, worked on some of those reforms, and a lot of things
he's a
were
man
done
that will work
together. He is, you know,
for the good of the
he
party.
was
I
a
mean,
state auditor, 2 auditors before myself, or 3. And when I was there, a lot of the staff had also served under him, and he had a reputation. And he actually was a very good state auditor who was very engaged, and he tried to, you know, make some reforms within the office. He did a lot of things, more than some of the others, like Dutcher, who did, you know, nothing while she was auditor. And so, you know, and I think he's trying to do that as
you're just
governor.
saying that because she was your opponent, but
No, she
But the
she
fact
didn't
of the
run.
matter
She was
is-
not my opponent. I
the
ran
fact of the
against
matter
Johnson,
is that
so.
Dayton is a class act, and we're damn lucky that we had him as governor these last 2 years. As it was, we still have 2 constitutional amendments, which should not be.
Well, I
And,
disagree. You know, the problem is that
Yeah, you think that voter ID is important. In a state that has never had voter fraud, that has had...
Ellen, we just prosecuted over 200 felons that voted
And
in the 08 election.
Felons voted
ballots.
because their parole officers did not tell them that they were not eligible to vote.
Well, I don't know
That
why.
has nothing to do with intentional impersonation. That has nothing to do with the real meaning of
They're
fraud.
prosecuted.
We have had one
Alan,
case
they're
of
prosecuted
impersonation.
because they were supposedly new. And so there was hundreds, and those are
They
just the
weren't
ones that were
told.
prosecuted.
They weren't told.
Incredible amount of, but they wouldn't have been on the voter rolls in the first
A
place.
felon can
in the
vote
first place. They would
in
not
this
have been
state.
on the voter rolls in the first place if we had, you know, this sort of
If
thing.
we had
So-
proper parole officers
No,
who
if
were
we had-
doing their
if we had
job,
photo ID.
and these people, no,
And
that
it's
wouldn't
not-
stop.
it's
I
not
wouldn't
a-
stop it.
And it's not a parole officer's
You're-
job to tell
well, for
them
instance,
everything. You can do this, you can't do this, you can't do this.
Does
They should have-
your
they should have known. And they
driver's
should have been on
license
the-
with your picture on it say former felon?
I hope not.
No.
Because I'm not.
And if a felon gets a driver's license with his picture on it, it doesn't say that
And
he's
they would
a-
have driver's licenses, right?
That's right.
Right. But they would not be on the voter rolls. They wouldn't be on the voter rolls. And so that's, you know,
But
that's the
that's a
difference.
mistake in the criminal
Yeah.
justice system. Not.
Well,
There's
in the
been one
Secretary of State's
impersonation
office,
case, and
It
I
was an
think that.
impersonation case.
Yeah, I think it was
of someone
Republican who
worked-
impersonated a human being,
No,
but
no,
I'm
no,
not
no.
sure. But
A few months ago, there was a big story about a gal who worked for Mark Ritchie, who was prosecuted for impersonation and illegal
and she
voting.
had been working
And
since Mary
She
Kiffmeyer,
did. She started working under Kiffmeyer.
the
That's true.
Republican
That's true.
Secretary of
That's
State,
true, but she was
gave her
voting
the job.
illegally.
And Mark
under Mark
Ritchie,
Ritchie in his
as
own office.
opposed to
His own office.
Republicans, didn't fire everybody when he came in. He kept in the personnel that were there. So he didn't clean house.
Well, you can't.
Otherwise,
clean
she
house.
wouldn't have had
as someone
a
who's
job.
come in and out of agencies, you know, I've served as a commissioner. You can clean house with your non with your appointed staff, but you don't clean house with the, you know, the people that have been there, the rank and file that have done the job. And you know, like you said, when I was auditor, there were people there that had worked there for 20 years and had worked under Dayton and had worked. And so there's very little actual house cleaning that occurs. Even when a new governor comes in, there's new commissioners and there's a few at the top, but otherwise it's the same folks. So
Now, I want to quote something from December 23rd, 1910. I will push causes that establish sanity.
Mm-hmm.
That was said by Pat Anderson, and then she supports voter ID, which is insanity.
no, that's very
And makes
sane.
government less intrusive. abortion, birth control? Do either of
What
those
about-
things make government less intrusive, where you're intruding into the lives of women, where you are imposing your choice
Alan, I don't
over
think
their
that,
choice?
I don't think that there's been any birth control legislation that's been put out. First of all, I'm a strong believer in birth control, strong, including for my children, as soon as they needed that
Okay.
sort of thing.
And you are also pro-life.
That's right.
But
that's a
that's your
different issue.
individual decision. You're not necessarily ready to impose that on everybody.
Oh, I believe that life begins at conception, and so that's the question. It was where do you believe life begins? And if you believe it begins there rather than at the birth, then you need to protect that
Yeah,
human
that's-
being, just
that-
like you would protect a born human being.
But you
And so
don't
that's a very
necessarily
different
have to
issue.
impose that belief on somebody else who believes otherwise.
Well,
I mean, I think you also believe in the separation of church and state.
I do, but I don't
although
think
we're
this
getting
is
away from
I don't
it
think this
in
is
this.
a religious issue. Some people look at it from a religious standpoint. Go back to the Ron Paul, who is a libertarian, almost in a big L, and he's he is a baby doctor. He's very pro-life as a libertarian, and he's seen it up close. And as our society medical gets better and better and better, the question of the viability of a fetus, and so those questions are really changing.
Our medical abilities get better and better
Right.
and better. But our standing in the world in terms of where we are in medicine, it costs twice as much for somebody in this country to get good medical care as
yes.
twice as much as in any of the other 138 countries that have single payer in some form or another. We never talked about single payer, but don't we need really, really reform? And I'm not talking about what Ryan proposes, because there's a guy who runs a 3-minute marathon. Well, if he runs a 3-minute marathon, I'm going to fly on my own wings to Burnsville this afternoon.
He's actually in amazing physical shape, which he's in because of course, his father had all those issues. But I don't support single payer. I mean, the last thing I want to do is turn our healthcare system over to the government. And we've looked at,
Medicare for everybody? Medicare, the best
absolutely
system
not.
in medicine that exists probably in the world?
But we have other issues. I agree we need, and I think most people would agree that we need some major reform. The one issue is you really don't have a market, any sort of free market, because of the way the insurance system is set up. And like here in the state of Minnesota, we have, I can't remember the number, but it's either 60 to 80 mandates on what needs to be covered under insurance. And so only insurance companies in Minnesota can even do insurance because of that, because it's so
only a few,
specialized.
yeah.
So that's
And,
part of this across state
part of the
lines.
problem,
Well,
but universal health care, well, Mitt Romney was for it before he was against it.
that's right.
But like
That's
every
part
other
of why I did not vote for Mitt
like
Romney.
every other position he has taken on so many things.
Well, Romney had, yes, absolutely on that issue. Romney was a governor of Massachusetts, which makes Minnesota look like a right-wing state. Massachusetts, I think they have 16% registered Republicans or something, which is pretty amazing that he, as a Republican, can get elected statewide in that state. So
It's
he was
amazing
dealing,
that he could get the nomination of the Republican Party
yeah,
with some of the people that you had running, and/or some of the people who possibly should have been running.
Yeah, I think it was a should have been question. The more conservatives and the Republicans were split, and so you kept having, 10% here for this candidate or 20% for this candidate, and Romney was able to stay above that because he was considered the more moderate or liberal.
He was able to
of the
maneuver it
batch.
and buy it for corporate.
He really was.
For the corporations,
Oh,
and he's
the
got
guy
the
that
nomination
spent the corporate
now.
money was Newt Gingrich.
And,
Let's talk about that. I think his buddy out of Vegas.
Who? Adelson?
Yeah, that spent a
We
fortune
should
trying
drum
to
him
help
out of
him,
the country,
so.
but unfortunately we can't, because he is an American.
He is an American.
But
and he's a person, and so he
now-
gets to
An
do what he
outrageous
wants
person, right?
under Citizens
I don't know.
United.
I don't know if he's a person, but
He's a person. But that was pretty amazing.
you know, outrageous conduct. And the fact of the matter is that Gingrich is very bright. His
Extremely bright.
his time has
Yeah.
come and gone, and it shouldn't have been. But you know, you have people, and a lot of them were posturing for 2016 when they gave their speeches, when they failed to mention Romney, or just said, "Well, I support Mitt Romney," and then talked about
But
themselves.
Alan, I think Mitt Romney will be the next president, and it isn't.
I think
I
I'm
mean-
moving to Canada.
I'm moving to somewhere else if he's not. I absolutely, if you look at statistically, when you have economic conditions like this, incumbent presidents are not reelected under this. And Obama,
when you have
had
a
to- was-
legislature which turns down every suggestion that you made, a legislature that refuses to meet with you and compromise, a legislature where the leader of the Senate says our only purpose for these next 2 years is to see that Barack Obama is a one-term president. Nothing is
The
going to
Democrats
get
control
done.
the Senate. They control
Nothing
the Senate.
is going to
Well,
get
no,
done. But where things happen
did
is in the House.
And frankly,
Where-
Barack Obama
where
controlled
appropriations-
he controlled all three branches of government the first 2 years of his presidency. And
The first 9 months.
first couple, and they implemented some very unpopular things. And we have record deficits. When he came into office, he said, we're going to
George-
spend all this money.
George
with the
W. Bush had
stimulus.
nothing to do with that.
Bush was-
two
Bush-
wars. That was a name, by the way, that never came up at the Republican convention. I've never seen a convention where they had a president who served for 2 terms, 8 years, and nobody knew his name.
Well, that's not true. And he was on.
Did you hear his
several
name
videos.
mentioned?
He was on several videos. There was a whole thing with he and his
Yeah,
wife.
at 8 in the morning
you know.
when nobody's in the convention hall. I mean, come on, give me a break.
It was only in the evening, so we didn't start our sessions till 7:30.
2 wars
But he was
off
on
the books.
Several videos. So, and Obama has continued those wars. I'm not going to defend.
He ended the Iraq War. He
Well,
didn't continue it.
I'm not going.
and-
I'm not going to defend the amount of money that was spent under Bush either,
And I'm not
because
gonna-
I think that is what has created this change in our party.
I'm
is that-
not
and the
going to
whole
defend Afghanistan because I
limited
think we should be
government.
out of there also. And you had a son
And I
who
agree.
was over there.
And I agree with you. I
And-
absolutely agree with you.
I know you wonder every day, am I going to get the knock on the door?
Yep.
And no parent should have to go through
That's
that in this day and age over something like Afghanistan. These people
Mm-hmm.
have been fighting for 2,000 years. Nobody has controlled them. The tribes are going to keep killing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Why we are over there thinking we're going to bring democracy to them is ludicrous.
I agree with you completely about that.
Get
And
that
I think a
down.
lot of
Mark that
Republicans do.
piece on the.
I think a lot of them, especially the more small limited government Republicans, and the war has cost us a huge amount of money, and frankly,
Just get out of people's bedrooms.
I don't think
If
Republicans.
gays want to
Republicans
marry, are
aren't
you
it-
threatened by gays marrying?
No, I am not personally threatened by gays marrying. No,
What
I'm not.
difference does it make if they want to marry and
Well, I
go, through
think it's a.
go through the same aggravation that you have? I mean, why shouldn't they?
I think it's a. That is part of where you bring in, more of the Christian principles that this country was founded on, and the question and it becomes-
Judeo-Christian principles.
Judeo-Christian.
Please,
That's right. I forget where. Yeah.
please.
I
Don't-
forget,
Don't leave
Alan.
out the good guys.
I forget.
He was one of ours.
He was. Yeah, but I think that's a very culture. I mean, if you look at it's passed everywhere it's been on the ballot. The question will be what happens here in Minnesota, and we have a little higher threshold for these ballot questions because if you don't vote on the question, it's a no vote. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what
Wise thing.
happens.
We have a terrible system
this-
for putting constitutional amendments on the ballot.
Yeah, it's a very
like
high
in
barrier.
other states, like New York, you have to have it pass the legislature twice before it can go on the ballot as a constitutional
In
amendment.
two different sessions or
And,
just two different votes.
I think
How's
I
it work?
think 2 different sessions. I'm not even sure about that. But
That's
I
interesting.
mean, you shouldn't just be able to pass a law and make it a constitutional amendment because the governor vetoed the law in its original status. Much too easy.
Yeah, but you can do that in New York too.
Constitution
apparently.
is too important.
But that is a question for the people, and the people in the state are going to vote yes or vote no on these ballot questions,
It's
and
going
whether
to be,
they want
it's
them.
going to be really interesting
It's
this year. There's a
very
lot of
interesting.
money being
Yep.
spent on both sides, and I certainly hope that voter ID falls.
It's
I
going
hope
to pass, and it
for
needs to
senior
pass.
citizens, and
Absolutely
I hope
needs to
for
pass.
students, and I hope for really the handicapped, and I hope for soldiers overseas and in the service.
They all have
and I
photo
hope
IDs,
for
Alan.
students.
Did you know that you need to have a photo ID to get welfare? You need to have a photo ID to go get food at the food shelf. I know that because my son was
But it's-
volunteering at
you
the
don't have
Salvation
to
Army.
have a
You have to have
government-issued
yes, you
photo
do.
ID.
Yes, you do. At the food
Driver's
shelf.
license will do it for you.
At the food shelf. That's a government-issued photo ID.
What are you going to do with all these people in nursing homes?
They all have photo IDs. You can't get Medicare. You can't. They all have photo IDs.
They don't all have photo
Yes,
IDs.
they do. They all do.
Both
This
my
is
mother,
that is an argument
both
of
my
the
mother
left.
and my
That is
mother-in-law
not true.
no longer had photo ID.
They may not have a driver's license,
At
but
99
you can
and-
get a free
Yeah, if you can
identity
get
card, and you
first
have
place,
to have. You can't get your prescriptions.
it's
without
going
a
to
photo
cost.
ID.
It's
You can't
going to
get anything.
cost in the state for you libertarians who want to cut down the cost of
I'm
government.
a Republican.
It's going to go. You're a libertarian Republican. It's going to cost over $50 million a year. You want to cut down the cost of government?
Not true. Absolutely not true.
Absolutely
Absolutely
true.
not true.
Absolutely.
That is an argument that is absolutely
The
false. There's
statistics.
no numbers on
the
that.
statistics are there.
It's that we have photo ID and
Mark Ritchie
can't even-
was terribly abused for a lot of things
Mark Ritchie
when he has tried to
was
do a job.
absolutely
when
messing around.
Kiffmeyer
He
is sitting up.
unconstitutionally trying to change the ballot language.
They never said it was unconstitutional.
They said he
s-
did not have the authority to do what he did, and it was
4-2.
wrong.
But did you read Paul Anderson's dissent? Oh,
No, I read some quotes from Page, but it was 4-2, pretty clear.
If you wanna
that he
see
had
something
no
that's
authority
brilliant.
to try to manipulate, a ballot question that the legislature
it's
put on there.
the fact that it was the law, the existing law at the time, which both Alan Page and Paul Anderson pointed out, should have been adhered to by the 4 Republicans who voted the other way, and we're not
Existing
done with
law
that
on
yet.
the marriage
We're not.
amendment? Is that what? I didn't read his dissent, so it's
On the
existing.
photo ID.
Yeah, I didn't read the dissent. I have to tell you. Doesn't matter
have.
because the other side. was
We got
right.
more to talk about.
All right.
And we have 25 seconds left.
You got to have me on more.
Oh, you can come on as often as you like.
Thank you. How about
spirited-
right after the election?
A spirited
after we
exchange.
pass
really.
the constitutional amendments. And
Pat Anderson, we love you. Come back as often as you can.
Thanks, Alan.